Now the Fergie air cleaner, it oil bath cleaner of course, with the big gauze inside. What surprised me was that you actually couldn't get this gauze out easily. In fact, I looked on the Grey Fergie forum and found out that you actually can pull it apart, but you have to actually drill out spot welds that are holding this this plate in place. Now, I thought it'd only be a couple of spot welds, but there were, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 spot welds, which seems to be a bit of an overkill. Anyway, you can get it off, you drill it out, and then when you put it back, just put a screw or a bolt to hold that in place, which I'll do when I'm finished. But when you pull it out, these are filthy, and I used a pressure hose to clean them off. There are actually quite a few bands of that gauze. There are 3 rolls. Each roll has two layers of mesh. And if you use a mandrel, which I've got pushed up inside the internal pipe, you wind it around, part on the mandrel, part on the inner tube, and then gently turn it and it will fit back in. So it is possible to clean them. I'm surprised it wasn't made easier to clean, bearing in mind that it is a tractor and in a very dirty environment, but obviously from now on it will be able to be pulled apart and cleaned. So just putting them back together, it's going together quite easily. I've just pulled the Fergie Carby apart. The inside of it has got an enormous amount of rubbish. Actually, I've never seen so much rubbish in a carburettor, and obviously in that condition it was never going to work, so I'll have to actually try and clean this out. I'll soak it in petrol, then use carburettor cleaner and see if I can clean it up, see if the internal parts are actually any good. I'm hoping they are, so at this stage I'll clean it up and go from there. Now the rocker shaft, I've just pulled the rockers off the shaft. The rockers, a bit like the carburettor, are the worst I've ever seen. They actually have indents of the valves in the pads of the rockers. Not just 1 or 2 of them, but all of them. And some of the indents are quite deep. Now, I think they're far too far gone to even consider trying to find somewhere I can have them reshaped. The recesses look like they're up to 1 millimetre deep on some of them, so they're excessively damaged. Why? I suspect maybe that the oil pressure's dropped, or there's been an oil blockage, and the lack of oil to the top of the motor, and they've just worn down. I mean, they must have made a hell of a racket when they were running, but anyway, I'll look for a second-hand set and go from there. Now, valve timing on the engine. You can look at the manual, and that gives you a pretty good idea of what you've got to do. But bearing in mind that I'm putting a new camshaft sprocket on, which is not marked, and I've actually then got to find the proper position for top dead centre, and then the position of the camshaft. So I'm actually got it properly lined up. So when the when the sprocket is marked, which the old one was, what you do is you line up the mark on the crankshaft sprocket with the mark on the other sprocket. Now, okay, that's fine. What I did, the new one of course isn't marked, so before I took the governor plate off, I actually marked the governor plate with a scratch which aligned to where here it is there, you might be able to see it, that where the mark was on the old sprocket, immediately behind that I put a mark on the plate holding the governor, so when I swap them over I know where the sprocket is meant to be. Now then it's just a case of lining that mark up with the mark there. Now, to make sure I've got the camshaft in the right position, the manual tells you that when these marks are lined up, exhaust valve number 4 and inlet number 4, one should be just opening and one closing. So what I did was to turn the camshaft here until those two, and you might be able to see them just moving. There, the inlet is just starting to open, and if I take it back a bit, the exhaust was just starting to close. So in that position, the sprocket should be able to go on, line up on its holes, which it does, and the mark on the sprocket will line up with the crankshaft. Now, the other thing with timing and finding top dead centre, just so happens top dead centre is where the keyway points down, but to get an approximation of where that is, you might be able to see that there's a hole underneath the starter motor where you should be able to push a I guess a thin screwdriver, I'm just using a scribe here, push it through and it will locate into a hole in the flywheel. Now you use that for timing the engine apparently. So what I did was to make sure that all of that lined up. So yes, that lines up there, that's for timing, so you know this is about the right position, close to top dead centre or maybe a little bit before. It enables me now to line the sprockets up. So it's just something to be careful of. I didn't bother putting the rocker shaft on yet, mainly because it's easier to turn the motor and the camshaft without the springs pushing down. So I'll put that on when I've actually put the sprocket on. Once again, it's the simple things that seem to slow you up. This is the coolant distribution pipe for the head. Piece of brass that slides inside. When it's been tapped out, it's been damaged a bit, bent round the rear end there, and it was really deformed around the front. It's taken a lot to get it back into shape. And in doing so, I actually split the brass here, so I've had to silver solder that. I've now got it to a stage where it will go in, just need to tap it in. You shouldn't have to force it, obviously it won't just flop in, but this will just gently tap in place now. So it's all been repaired, so I can proceed and try and put the water pump housing on. The motor's now coming together. I've adjusted the tappets. I haven't put the rocker on yet. What I want to do is that I actually want to run the motor before I close that down, make sure the oil is coming up into the rocker shaft, and also so I can re-torque the head. I've painted the block I used some engine enamel there, a different version of grey, slightly darker grey, contrasts well with the pale grey for the body of the tractor. Still putting pieces on the motor. I've got to put the generator on. I've painted that up, cleaned all that up, and the starter motor I haven't got that on yet. The distributor still got to go in. A few things just to attach. What I'm about to do though is to put the front axle on. I've still got to put the main bars back to the tractor on this side. I had to replace the bolt down in here. I'll just replace that now and then get it ready for lifting up. Got the engine hoist to help me lift that. Incredibly heavy, especially when you're trying to do it on your own, but that'll lift up alright. So I'll just keep going along and keep building the front end of the tractor up. Now what I'm doing here is to actually install the distributor. I put new points in, new condenser, cleaned the distributor up. It seems to be reasonable sound condition, new rotor. Just a couple of things in putting these points in case you have a little bit of difficulty trying to put these little spring clips down in behind the bolt. You need to be aware that you don't only take off the two outside nuts, but in behind that second nut there's an installation piece which pulls out and reveals another nut which actually holds this bolt in place. So you undo that and then you can push that out and get these points in a lot easier. So there's just one thing. Timing, it depends on the model of tractor. There seems to be different ways of timing depending on when the engine was manufactured. This one really has very little adjustment in terms of advanced retard. Certainly has no indicators on it to indicate how much you're moving the distributor. One thing they all seem to have in common is there are holes in the flywheel, and if you I've just got a small drift there pushed in through and it locates a hole in the flywheel. Now it does that not only when it's on top dead centre, but at various other positions around the flywheel too. So there's not just one hole. You need to be mindful of that. So you need to work out where top dead centre is. Much easier when you don't have the top cover on. You can actually see when the both valves are closed, but you then need to be mindful that they stay closed during compression and only open again when the exhaust or when compression's completed, so the cylinder goes down and then it's coming back up again. So you can actually find a hole where you think that these are both closed, but it's actually about 180 degrees out of phase. So just be careful of that. If you can look through the cylinder, you can actually see the piston coming up for the compression stroke, and that's the key. So just setting this now, just a case of it's on the timing mark, and just have the points just opening when it's pointing to number one cylinder, which it is. So that's reasonably straightforward.